The In Conversation podcast series with author Nigel Beckles.
Welcome to the podcast.
Welcome to the In Conversation podcast series. My guest today is author Deanne Heron. Deanne, welcome to my podcast.
Thank you very much, Nigel. It's a pleasure, and thank you for the invitation.
Well, yes, how's the weather down? You live in Manchester, don't you? Manchester, UK?
Yes, I live in Manchester, which is northern England, and the weather at the moment is just, I can't even describe it. It's so beautiful. I've never seen weather like this, I think since I was a little girl. Blue skies, the temperatures are much higher than they would be in April. Perfect lockdown weather.
Okay. Well, if you can go outside, yes. Maybe
well,
not.
This is it. A garden. Lucky. I'm very lucky. I have a little garden which I can go and sit in, so I'm quite lucky.
Okay. So, talking about your location, where did you grow up?
Right. I was actually born in Kingston, which is the capital of Jamaica, and that's where my mother was living at the time. But my mum was given the opportunity to come to England. She was sent for, which is a phrase that the Caribbeans used, when I was 3. So she left me and my baby sister with my grandma in Portland, which is in the countryside. And I lived there with my gran until my gran died, unfortunately, when I was 6. I lived with a cousin until I was 9. And then I came to England when I was 9 years old. Okay. And that was a shock. It was like, I describe it as traveling from the earth to the moon, but I was still breathing.
Okay. So how was it growing up in Jamaica then?
Well, I remember vaguely, I went to private school, what they call private school, which was the church nursery school when I was 3. And I remember even then, you learned your ABC, and we learned to count and colours and different things. It was very strict, and good manners where you had to stand, when Miss came into the room, everybody had to stand. We were sort of 3-4 years old, but, there were certain standards that were expected. And then when I was 6 years old, I went to what we call big school, which is primary school. And again, I remember it was lovely because I was one of the younger ones of all my cousins, and they looked after me. But again, in the classroom, it was very, very strict. You couldn't talk, you'd get things thrown at you, or, you'd get a ruler hit on your hand or your leg smacked. So, discipline, very strict discipline. But it was lovely. It was a really lovely time.
Okay. So what were your favourite subjects when you were at school in Jamaica?
Now, when I was in Jamaica, I can't remember very much. I loved storytelling because I remember we didn't have television then, but I don't know if you've heard of Miss Louise Bennett.
Yes.
She is a famous she's a storyteller, writer. She does all sorts, and she used to have a program on the radio I don't know what evening it was, but we used to sit on my aunt's veranda, and there'd be like 10-15 of us. All my cousins would come round, the neighbours would come round, and we would listen to these stories, the comedy storytelling from Miss Lou. So I think from then I loved storytelling. And then when I came here, because I had to babysit my younger brothers and sisters while my mum went out to work, that was when I first started making up stories to entertain them. So I would say maybe writing and reading were my favourite subjects.
Okay. So when you arrived in the UK and finished off your, I suppose, primary education, as it were, did you go to college or university?
Yes, I did. There's a council estate on the outskirts of Manchester within Shaw. I don't know if you've heard of that. And we were one of the first black families to be moved onto that council estate. And I did my last year at Bagley Hall Primary School. And I don't know, it was difficult because I suffered a lot of racism, but I got a lot of support from my class teacher, Mr. Lawrence, and he is one of the main people why I started writing. But that's a long story that took a long time to tell. So I left Bagley Hall Junior School, went to Newhall Green High School, where I did my A-levels. Unfortunately, I couldn't afford to go to university, but I was fortunate, I never let anything stop me. and I applied to the city council for a job, even though all my friends were saying, "Oh, they're not going to give you that. They don't employ black people." But I got the job. And they then had a scheme where you could go to Manchester University, a day release to do your degree. And again, I applied, and again, all my friends said, they're not going to give you that, but I applied, and I got it, and that was how I was able to go to. It was Manchester Metropolitan University at the time. I went there on one day a week. While I worked for Manchester City Council, and I did my degree in public administration. So yes, that's my university education.
So what particular life experience do you believe changed you in a big way? Do you believe anything kind of changed your direction from where you were heading?
Yes, I think when I came to England initially, and saw the life was hard. I mean, we were poor, but it's like everybody was poor, whether you were white or black, we were all poor. We went to jumble sales to get our clothes, and, there was all sorts going on. But I think being given the opportunity to come here, I was just determined, I'm not going to let my mum down. My mum has brought me to this country, so I've got to do the best I can, to do the best I can at school, be the best, because my mum used to always say to us, I had to come from Jamaica and go and work in a factory, and none of my children are ever going to work in a factory, so she used to make us sit down and study and, do what we had to do. So, it was difficult, but I think being given the opportunity that I felt a lot of my friends that had left in Jamaica would never have, they, I think, gave me the motivation to try and be the best that I can be. But maybe the big changing point was having my daughter. I had my first daughter when I was 21. And because I'd suffered racism, I was a very shy person. I only spoke when I was spoken to. I was strong inside and nothing would stop me. But, if I was in a room with people, you wouldn't know I was there. I wouldn't say anything. And then I noticed when my daughter was about 2 or 3, I noticed she was doing the same thing. She was hiding behind my skirt. If anybody spoke to her, she wouldn't answer. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, no, this can't continue. So then I made the decision, right, from now on. We were in the church at the time. We were Seventh-day Adventists. And whenever they asked me to say the prayer or to do anything on the platform, I would always say no. And I thought, right, from now on, anytime I'm asked to do anything, I'm going to do it, no matter how scared I am. And that's what I did, Nigel. And my little daughter then started following me and came out of her shell.
Okay. So you're a very prolific writer. So how many books have you written so far?
Oh my gosh, Nigel, let me see. I've had 2 volumes of short humorous stories called Pardon the Money Stories published. And they are about my memories as a little girl, when the family used to get together, because I'm trying to keep the Jamaican patois going and just share memories that my grandchildren will never experience. So I've got 2 volumes of short humorous stories. I've also had 2 volumes of poetry published called Contemplation. And I have just had a science fiction novel called The Mandari Chronicles, published by Conscious Dreams Publishers.
Okay, well done. So that's a rather great departure from your usual work. So what inspired you to go down that particular direction in terms of writing about science fiction?
Writing has always been my first love, and I've always loved science fiction. My imagination has always operated on another level. But when I was younger, I used to read a lot of science fiction books. Can't even remember any of them now, but I know I just absolutely loved science fiction. But I never actually wrote science fiction. And must be about 15 years ago now, there was all sorts of stuff going on. And I don't know, we kept seeing these films with dwarves and elves and all sorts of things. And it got my brain going, thinking, hey, I wonder where these people get these ideas about elves and dwarves and whatever. And then I started having these weird dreams, Nigel. I actually dreamt I was back on the earth when it was first created, and that there were 3 races, elves, dwarves, and humans, called Medians, elves, and I can't remember, and the Leams, those are the elves. And then there was a race war, and people started fighting. And I dreamt that we didn't speak originally; we were telepaths, and we could transport ourselves wherever we wanted to go. And then there was the race wars, and incorporated in the flood in the Bible, from the Christian religion, a spacecraft actually took a group of people off the planet and took them to another planet.
Well,
And that was how my novel.
You do have a very active imagination.
Yes. So from those dreams, I then started putting together this novel of what the original people on the earth were like, how they developed, after the flood compared to the people who were taken off the planet. And then there was another war going on there. And eventually one of them ended up back on Earth, Camille. And he, was sort of studying the earth because they all thought everybody on the earth had died and there was no living beings on the earth. And then, as it carries on, he meets this woman, falls in love, and then he finds out she's not what she appears to be. She's actually an alien too. So they end up going back to his planet, and then that is when the story begins, because then the war really takes off, and they get caught up in a love triangle.
Oh, that sounds very intriguing, actually.
That's the Mandari Chronicles, which has just been published.
So, what inspired you to write your first book?
Right, what inspired me to write? As I said, when I was little, when I first came here, the black community was much closer. We had the partner. Everybody belonged to a partner because most people didn't have bank accounts. And you would take the money every week, because I remember my mom sending me with the partner money to the lady down the street. And then we'd take it in turn to get that money. And we'd meet, like at the weekends, people would get together, my family or friends, everybody would bring a dish. Somebody would bring the fish, somebody would bring the chicken, somebody would bring the rice and peas. And we'd all get together at the weekend and play music and just had a really lovely time. And we'd take it in turn to go to each other's houses. And it was the memories, the men being told off, and the older women, it was yes, auntie, no, auntie. You couldn't raise your voice at them. And I wanted to capture those lovely memories because I was thinking times have changed so much. Even my children don't remember that. I've got 2 daughters. And I'm thinking I would like to capture these memories so that my grandchildren can see what my life was like growing up. So that was what inspired me to start to write the Partner Money stories. And I love patois. I didn't even speak it properly when I was in Jamaica because I was in Kingston for my first 3 years. My grandma used to tell me off if I tried to speak patois and say, I must speak properly, because when I send you to England, I don't want your mother to tell me off. And then, of course, when I came here, because we lived in Wythenshawe, it was an all white. I was the only black kid in my school, in my primary school. So I had to lose my patois, the little patois I had overnight. So when I left home, I started listening to Miss Lou again, and one of my cousins is a Rasta. Whenever I went to his house, I'd listen to his friends and the way they spoke. I thought, right, okay, I'm going to learn to speak patois again, which is what I've done. So my books are written in English, but with Jamaican patois dialogue.
Okay, and how long did it take you to write your first book, Partner Money Stories?
Oh, years, Nigel, because I kept writing stories and I just leave them and then nothing happened. I had them all in a box, and unfortunately when I moved, that box was thrown out without me realizing, so I lost quite a lot of my writing.
Oh dear.
So I started writing again, and I was in a group. I can't remember. I don't think it was Facebook. And I was talking to this gentleman. He lives in Jamaica, and he was saying to me, "Oh, I see on the group that you write. Send me something. Let me see one of the things that you write." So I sent him a story, and immediately he wrote, thinking, "Oh my God, this is amazing! I love this." And he said to me that he knew. I forget the lady's name. She worked for the Jamaica Observer. This was a Sunday afternoon. And he said, "Right, I'm going to send this to her. And the next time I speak to her, I'm going to tell her, they need to publish your stories." Because the Jamaica Observer at the time had a pull-out magazine where they would publish stories each week. Anyway, he sent it, obviously must have emailed my story to this lady. About half an hour later, this is a Sunday afternoon, Nigel. Half an hour later, I got a message from her. "I love this story. We're going to publish it next week. Do you have any more?"
Oh, wow.
And The Jamaica Observer started publishing my stories for about 2 years, and they paid me. They published my stories more or less every week, and as a result of that, a friend of mine sent one of my stories to somebody, and that was sent to Hansib Publication. And they contacted me to say, we love your stories. Have you got any more? Have you thought of getting them published? And that was how my first book was published by Hansib Publication, the lovely Mr. Arif Ali. He published my first book without me doing anything at all.
Well, I was going to ask you because one of the pitfalls and obstacles of having your first book published is there can be a lot of challenges. So, what kind of challenges did you face? 'Cause it seems like you had quite an easy ride, really.
Yes, I think I did, because he sent me, all the stuff to read that I had to sign. And I was just so happy that I was getting my book published. I didn't even read it. I just signed it and sent it back, which I realized now was a huge mistake, because I'm finding out now that I can't get any of the royalties because they have to sell a certain amount of books before I can get any of the money. So I'm not getting anything. The only money I get are the books from the books that I sell from my website or when I go to events. But it was fairly straightforward. I didn't have to do anything. And my books are available all over the world. So I thank Hansib, even if I'm not getting any money from them. They are the ones who've advertised my writing. I'm told my books are on sale at both airports in Jamaica. I've had messages from people in Canada to say they've bought my books. I even went to Barbados, went to Bridgetown, went into this bookshop. And what did I see on the shelf? My book, Pardon My Story.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. So although, as I say, there were a few things I wasn't happy with, because publishing, as you know, is an absolute nightmare. But I must admit that Hansib Publication took all the pressure off me. They just did everything.
Okay. And when was your first book published? Pardon My Stories, Volume 1?
I had to check this morning, because honestly, it feels like about 20 years ago. It was actually in 2011, I think it was. Yeah, the first one was published in 2011. But as I said, it feels like it was a long time ago. And then everybody liked it so much that, again, Hansib asked me if I had any more stories. And the next year, they published Volume 2. So I've had 2 volumes published, as I said.
Okay. So you were telling us earlier about the science fiction book you've recently released. Are you working on any other writing projects at the moment?
I'm always working on something. At the moment, the thing that is in my head is this COVID-19. So I went on a course the end of last year. A friend of mine, a local businesswoman, she runs courses for women, be all you can be. And I went on this course, and it was suggested that we should do journaling every day, because, we do so much and we're here, there, everywhere, and our poor brains are being burnt out. It's a way of offloading. So I started journaling last year. And then when all this COVID-19 stuff happened, I started writing poetry about it. So it's like I write a poem every day about what's going on in my head at the moment.
Okay.
And I post the odd one on Facebook. But I've got so many now that I'm thinking maybe I should put them all together and have a 3rd volume of poetry published.
Okay. And what are your current thoughts on the current worldwide coronavirus pandemic?
Nigel, that is a very complicated question, because, yes, it's complicated because we are being bombarded with so much information, and my sixth sense always seems to be on it. And in all honesty, my sixth sense is at the moment telling me that we're being told a load of nonsense. And I don't want to influence anyone, but for me, I don't even bother reading the stuff that I'm sent now. But to me, it just doesn't make any sense. And I'm just thinking, there's something more to this. This COVID-19 thing makes no sense. It doesn't add up. But again, sometimes you just have to be careful, because I said I don't want to influence anyone. That's just my thoughts. So I've just been processing, in poetical form, what I think, just what is going on. But again, I'm just taking it one day at a time. There's no point stressing over something that we don't understand.
Mm.
We just have to wait and see what happens each day.
Well, that is very true. I mean, there are a lot of conspiracy theories flying around about the 5G telephone masts and
Yes, that's it. They're talking about 5G, and I'm thinking, really? So why would people deliberately invent something and put it out there if they know it's going to kill people and cause problems? It's not going to come back on them eventually. And how is that going to benefit anybody?
mm,
As I say, the jigsaw pieces, it's like they've all been thrown up in the air and they're not fitting together.
well, yeah, so I would agree with that. I mean, I do a lot of research. I mean, I research for my own books because my books are more kind of reference related
Mm.
as opposed to being, created, solely from someone's imagination, like your good self. But yes, there are a lot of people sharing stories that haven't really got any basis in reality. I mean, I received a meme a couple of weeks ago saying, "Oh, black people shouldn't go to the hospital because they're planning to exterminate us, etc.,
Yes, yes.
etc." And to advise someone who's not well not to go to hospital, you
That
know,
is just total nonsense because you're just scaring people and probably causing them to die or become seriously ill.
yeah. So yeah. Well, we'll see how it goes. I mean, no one really knows how we're going to come
Hmm.
out the other side of this pandemic, as it were.
No.
I
And
think.
then again, they say, sorry, Nigel, go on.
No, I was just going to say that I think the current UK government's response has been shambolic, to say the least,
Mm,
because the
mm.
first duty of any government of a country is to protect their citizens,
Well,
and
yes,
and
yes.
my
I think a
pers
lot more could have been done.
yeah, and my personal view is that they have failed. But that's for another day.
I have to agree with you there, Nigel. But as I say, it's complicated. And there's the other thing where it's being said now that there's a higher percentage of BAME people who have suffered from COVID-19 and who have died. And strangely enough, just in our community, the majority of people that I've heard who got it are black male. There were very few women that I've heard. There are quite a number of people I've heard who, some of them are still in hospital. I think one gentleman has actually been released now, and a couple of them have died, and they're black males.
Mm.
So it just makes you wonder: is there something in that?
Well, I think in terms of vitamin D deficiency, a good friend of mine sent me an article a couple of weeks ago, which was referenced by 157 doctors, and they were making
Hmm.
the case that because black people can often suffer a deficiency in vitamin D, that can then
Yes.
make black people more susceptible to succumbing to the virus.
Yes, I have heard that as well. And that's why I've been encouraging my family and everybody to go out in the garden as much as they can. Try and go out in the sun, take vitamin D3, and just, try and look at their diet and basically just try and eat organic stuff, more fruit and veg, and leave the fast food alone, because I think that plays quite an important role in our health.
Indeed. And, when people were panic buying toilet paper, like it was going out, like,
I just I can't get my head around that. I'm thinking, okay, you're gonna go panic buy bread, baked beans. That I can understand. Butter, panic buy toilet paper.
yeah.
Why? Just- sorry, Nigel, but it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, I was more concerned with my immune system, which I've always been concerned with anyway. So I was making
Yeah,
sure I always stocked up with my ginger, my lemon, my garlic.
there you go, Nigel, because that was what I stocked up on: garlic, ginger, lemons, and other fruits, which is what I've been overdosing on because I had really bad flu a few weeks ago and I was quite worried that it might have been,
Mm,
the horrible C. But I spoke to my doctor and she said, without being tested, she couldn't actually say yes, but she said it just sounded like it was flu. And she asked me what I was doing and I told her, and she said, no, that's perfect. You continue doing exactly what you're doing with your garlic, your ginger and whatever, because it seems to be working, which
mm.
is what I did. And I'm fine now. I had a horrible tickly cough that wouldn't go. But now, as soon as I start to get sort of croaky or whatever, warm water with lemon juice, And I put ginger, I put garlic and onion in everything. And it seems to be working. Your garlic, your ginger, lemon juice, and top up on your vitamin C if you can get vitamin D3 and go out in the garden in the sun.
Yes, indeed. Anyway, let's get back to your writing. Also, have you got a poem you can share with us?
I have. I've got a poem. You're probably sick to death of Corona, but I wrote this one. When all this thing first started, I was trying to get my head around it. I'm thinking, what's all this stuff? So I don't know. Do you want me to share this one?
Of course.
Okay, excuse me. It's called 2020 Coronavirus Crisis. I wish someone had warned me of March 2020. Surreal and set to get worse. I thank God I am not a brave and vulnerable carer, doctor or nurse. Are we confused characters from a surreal science fiction film? Town and countries, continents on self-isolation lockdown at politicians' whim? Half-empty trains and buses, half-empty or completely cancelled flights, bare shelves in shops, supermarkets, or restrictions on what we buy, causing anger and fights. Like many others, curtailed, I'm wandering around in a coronavirus daze asking, really? Why? Are these the manifestation of end times actions predicted by numerous religions? How could this be happening? Imprisoning people in fear in their homes, trampling independent visions. So where is God when numerous rivers across the planet have reportedly turned blood red? Is this the end? And should we prepare our souls because very soon we'll all be dead? So will Jesus, the Saviour, now appear through dark, threatening clouds from above? Earthquakes in diverse places, humans full of horrific hate and having no love. Am I overthinking? Looking at the bigger picture instead of seeing heaven, thinking, what the hell? Is there something sinister going on? Satan in disguise, pulling the masses, malleable strings, while the elite are safe and well. Okay, Nigel, that's 2020 coronavirus crisis.
That's very deep and very profound.
Did you like that?
Oh, yes.
It was my poor little brain going over time as usual.
Well, it's always good to get it out. But going back to your writing, what do you think makes your book stand out from other books written on similar subjects?
Well, the short stories, people always say to me that I've just captured the memories from their childhood, because a few people have come to me and have said, wow, Deanne, that was my family. That's exactly the sort of things and that's what my grandma would have said. So that, they buy volume 1 and they come back and buy volume 2. And a lot of people buy them because they said the elders love listening to them. So I've got some audio versions now because, again, they say the older people, they love listening and they laugh their heads off, especially, when I try to speak Patois. they like that. I think it's just wanted to capture something, to pass on to the younger generation.
In terms of your favourite authors, who are your favourite authors? And what are your top 3 books?
Now you're asking. Nigel, at the moment, I've got a pile of books waiting to be read. Because I just don't seem to have, I didn't have time before, and now I don't know. I just for reading rather. Maya Angelou first jumped into my head. She's the American poet.
Yes.
She's a singer. She does all sorts of poet, singer, civil rights activist, and she's written quite a few books, autobiographies, poetry books, and then there's Alice Walker, and I think maybe again, like I said before, Miss Louise Bennett. And it's mainly people who write about things, I think, that shine a light on the path for who we are. Another one which I quite like is Steve Harvey's book, Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man. Because again, I think it just says so much about the problems that we're having at the moment in relationships. And Steve Harvey sort of explains, how a man's brain works, how a woman's brain works, and how we could get on better if we just understood each other better.
Yes,
so
I've got.
Maybe, yeah.
I've got that book actually. I thought it was pretty good. It's a bestseller. Some people rubbished it, but I think it was very insightful, and it was written
I
in
thought so
layman's
too.
terms. So I thought to myself, it was pretty good. I mean, one of my favorite quotations is Albert Einstein. If you can't explain
Hmm.
it simply, you don't understand it properly. And I think he just explains
There you
it
go.
on a basic level.
Yes, yes. Because there's no point writing something in highfalutin language that the man in the street doesn't understand. If you are wanting to reach a particular audience, like with me, I'm wanting to reach, my people with my books, the younger generation, then I have to write things in a language that they will understand. So I write them in English, but I tone down the patois so that they can understand if they don't understand, raw Jamaican patois.
Yeah, that's very true. And what advice would you give to someone who wanted to become an author and have their books out there?
Now there you go. We've all got we have all got a book in us. We live such interesting lives, all of us, regardless of race or color. And I actually facilitate writing workshops. So what I say to my students, just write. Get a notepad or on your computer, and whatever comes in your head. Don't wait until you have everything in order and it's all there, or if you have time, you won't. Get a notebook, carry it in your handbag, in your pocket, whatever. And as something comes into your head, just jot it down and write and rewrite. And that's the thing, get the thoughts going and just jot those down first. And I call those the bones. And then make sure you do your research and get your facts right, because fortunately we've got Google now, but you have to be so careful. You can't really take for granted everything. You have to check different sites to make sure that you've got the facts. But if you're going to write about something, speak to the elders and check. Grandma, what happened, in 1950, Grandma? Did you really do so and so and so? And what did you do? Check your facts. I think that is the key. And make it interesting. Don't copy what anybody else has written. Write from your own unique perspective. And that is what I would say.
And besides writing, what other activities are you involved with?
Oh my gosh. At the moment, nothing. Yeah, I've got an empty diary. But Nigel, I do so many things because, as you probably know, I'm a qualified counsellor and cognitive behaviour therapist, and I also train people who want to become counsellors. Well, I did do, but the organisation has closed down. They're just doing online training. So I'm a counsellor. I'm a trainer. I've been a foster carer for 20 years. I've fostered, I think, nearly 39, 40 different young people, with different support needs, from about 1.5 to teenagers.
Wow.
What else do I do? I go into schools and colleges and I do Black History presentations. I organise events in the community, social events. I do all sorts. Now I go into all people's homes and read stories for them and encourage them to share their stories. I do all sorts, Nigel.
Busy woman.
I wear many hats, and I love everything I do, and that's the problem. That's why I can't give things up. So maybe this coronavirus thing is perhaps a good thing for me, because I've been forced to give up all these things and take better care of myself.
Well, I think it can be a blessing for many people. It just depends on their mindset. If you see it as something that is kind of restrictive, and you're not allowed to do this and not allowed to do that, and you focus your energy on the negatives, then you're going to get more negatives, basically.
Of course.
So my attitude is to deal with things that I can deal with within within my area of control. I can't control what's going on out there, so I need to focus on what I'm doing at home. What can I do? Like a podcast,
Exactly,
for example.
Exactly. Yes, you do what you can do, what's right in front of you, and don't stress about things you can't do. I just remember something else that I do, actually. I forgot. I present a news program. Well, I was doing, but again, station has closed down and the guys are recording their stuff. I was presenting a fortnightly African Caribbean news and music program on one of our local radio stations, and that's something I've done for years for different radio stations, because I just think there's always negative news out there regarding BAME people, and I just wanted to share some of the positive news, because there's so much that our people are doing. So I start off with local news, national, I go to Africa, wherever Black people are doing things and excelling, and I share the positive news. That's another one of the hats I wear.
Wow. Multitasking and multi-talented. So, Deanne, how can people contact you? And how can they obtain your
Right.
books?
Right. Well, I have a website. As I say, you can get my books from Amazon and various other places, but I don't get any of the money. I only get the money if you buy them directly from me. You can get signed copies of all four, my two short stories and my two poetry books, and the novel will be on there soon. And they're on my website. And that is all the W's. That's www.pardnermoneystories. And that's PARDNER, moneystories.co.uk. So if you go and find my website, and you can buy, as I said, signed copies on there, very reasonable. They're only $6.99, and you can you can find me on Facebook. Just search "Partner Money Stories" by Deanne Heron. You can see loads of examples of my poetry. What else? Or just in case you can't find all of that, just go on Google and search Deanne Heron, DEANNE Heron, HERON, and you'll see my website and loads of other information about me.
Okay. And also, what are your future plans on your life journey? Have you got anything you really feel you want to do or need to
Now,
do?
Now again, Nigel, that's an interesting question because, from the day I set foot in this country, 9 years old, I told myself I was going to work, earn loads of money, buy a house in Jamaica and go back to Jamaica. But those plans in recent years have changed because I'm not quite happy with the way things are going in my beautiful country. So my plan now is to possibly stay here, but go and spend maybe a month in Jamaica and a month in, the different Caribbean islands, because I went to Barbados last year and absolutely love it. I've been to Gambia, which is where my son-in-law is from, and it's like Jamaica when I was a little girl. So my plan now is perhaps not to retire completely, because I am of that age, and my head is full of grey hair. So my plan is to semi-retire and spend more time, perhaps a month at a time, abroad in one of the Caribbean or one of the African countries.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time, Deanne. And
No, thank you, Nigel.
yeah.
It's really lovely talking to you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. Because I could talk all day. I could just keep going. So thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You are very welcome. You take care.
All right. We'll speak again soon, Nigel.
Okay.
Take care.
All right. Bye now. Thank you for listening. Please join me for another In Conversations podcast very soon for more interesting and entertaining discussions. Stay safe.